Welcome to Industry TV Network. Make sure you hit the like button, share, and subscribe. In this video, we'll be taking a look back into the 70s, which is very fascinating for me. I remember growing up in the 70s, how much fun it was, how I just was so proud to be a part of the black race. It just seemed like it was a time where there was so much displays of beautiful music and soul, and I didn't know about the dark sections. I wasn't aware of the street aspect as an outsider looking in as a child. I didn't know about the big drug kingpins. Now, if you ask me in retrospect, it looks like a way to become a millionaire overnight was available during those times, and that was through selling drugs. There were a lot of kingpins in the 70s, but one of the most talked about was Nicky Barnes. And I find his story to be very fascinating. I'm going to be doing different videos on Nicky Barnes and those associated with Nicky Barnes and Harlem in the 70s. And one of those notable names that people think of when they think about those times is Guy Fisher. Guy Fisher wrote a book about, he just basically wrote a book about himself. And in that book, he spoke on Sean Diddy Combs' father, Melvin Combs. Now, over the years, we've been hearing nothing about him, really much about his father, except that he may have been possibly unalived and set up because he was snitching on fellow street members. I'll put it that way. But Guy Fisher, in his book, gave a different perspective. Fans of Sean Diddy Combs have grown accustomed to seeing his mother Janice by his side throughout the years, but his father, Melvin Combs, tragically never got to see his son become the mogul he eventually became. He was gunned down in 1972 in New York when Diddy was only 3 years old. The circumstances surrounding Melvin's murder remain partially unclear. However, it has been widely reported that he was also involved in Harlem's street life. Late drug lord Frank Lucas previously said in a chat with Nicky Barnes for New York Magazine in 2007 that Melvin would often be at his home. Additionally, it appears that Combs' father ran into legal issues before he was gunned down. He was previously arrested in 1971 for heroin possession and was found to have $45,000 in cash. His passing was linked to a massive drug ring bust, though no one was ever held accountable for his murder. Combs, who has 7 children, has admitted he does not remember much about his father. However, he does believe he got his sense of style from his dad. During a New Yorker profile in September 2002, the Bad Boy founder revealed, "People say we have a similar approach to fashion. They say he was the flyest man around." While this may be true, Janice shielded her son from the true nature of Melvin's untimely demise. Recently interviewed by a publication, I'm not sure which publication, the designer Dapper Dan spoke on Janice Combs and Melvin Combs as he was around them. He grew up with them. And this is what he had to say.
The whole Puff Daddy situation that's going on right now.
Okay. I want you to listen to this carefully. I grew up with Puff Daddy's parents. Yeah. So, we all come from home, born here, raised here. No matter what happens in the culture, it didn't just start. No matter what happens in the culture, it didn't just start. A lot of things that you see happen came about from not even from my generation, but the generation that became before me. It's just that. A lot of the things that's happening today, because of social media, everybody gets to know about it.
Now, I'm not sure exactly what Dapper Dan meant by the lifestyle they were leading, but I was hearing plenty of rumors over the years that Miss Janice Combs allegedly was an SEX worker back in the days. So I don't know if that was what he was alluding to, but I just figured that was an interesting part to put into this video. But let's continue. When Diddy was a young child, Janice Combs did not want to reveal the truth about how Melvin Combs passed away to Sean Diddy Combs, according to the creator of Revolt TV. This was done to keep him from choosing the same path as his father did. During a 2006 interview with Oprah Winfrey, Diddy recalled that his mother claimed Melvin passed away in a car accident. However, the music producer said he began to uncover the truth earlier on. I put two and two together. I noticed that guys from the streets in Harlem always seemed to know my family's last name. I used to run with your father, they would tell me. All of my uncles were street hustlers as well. During his May 2014 Howard University commencement speech, Combs again addressed how he learned about his dad's slang. He stated that while attending school, he did research in the library where he discovered a newspaper article detailing that his father had been killed in a drug deal gone wrong. While it seemed that Combs had answers regarding Melvin's demise, internet rumors have swirled regarding why someone would want Melvin taken out. Hip-hop culture researcher and founder of Valtown Entertainment, Brian Valmond, shared a March 2024 thread on X, formerly known as Twitter, about Melvin Combs allegedly being slaughtered over claims that he was cooperating with federal investigators in a drug probe. While there was no proof that Melvin was going to turn on his fellow illicit business associates, this tale has lived on for years. In a February 1973 article in the New York Times titled 10 Found Guilty of Heroin Charges, Combs was named as a co-conspirator in a massive narcotics case, though he had already passed before the others were convicted. Prosecutors on the case believed his passing could be linked to other members involved, though it's unclear who and why this could be. Online forums have also debated whether or not Melvin's being a police informant played a role in his demise. In former Kingpin Frank Lucas's 2011 book, Original Gangsta, he addressed the snitch allegations. Lucas maintained that the rumors of Melvin being disloyal to his crew were not true. No matter the reason, Melvin being violently taken from his loved ones has a lasting impact on Sean Diddy Combs, who is now facing troubling allegations of his own. Guy Fisher, who was part of Nicky Barnes' crew, The Council, wrote a book and spoke on Melvin Superfly Combs as well. Although Bumpy Johnson's name rings the biggest bells, when I think about the black gangsters of the 1960s, I must say that one of the most flamboyant and successful gangsters I have personally known from the streets of New York during that era was Melvin Combs, the father of Sean Diddy Combs. Superfly was the most noted and successful black movie made in the 70s. It was also the movie that inspired me to become a successful street hustler. It inspired me because everyone who knew Melvin Combs knew his nickname was Superfly, and that the movie was all about his life and times. The custom-made black Cadillac Eldorado Ron O'Neal drove in the movie belonged to a real pimp by the name of KC. It was Melvin Combs who personally talked to KC and got him to lend his pimp mobile to Ron O'Neal for the movie. The cost to make the movie was a little more than $100,000. Melvin personally gave Ron O'Neal an undisclosed amount of money to star in what was known to those in the know as Melvin's movie. What few people knew about Melvin Combs is that he was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and his family relocated to New York, where he and his two brothers and sisters moved into the Patterson Projects in the Bronx with his aunt, Miss Bootsy. I was raised in the Patterson Projects as well. I lived in 2595, the project building directly across from 300 Morris Avenue, where the Combs family lived. Melvin's youngest sister, Pat, was one of my first girlfriends. For the last 50 years, I have remained true friends with her and her husband, George. Melvin Combs was several years older than me. He was also one of the very first black guys living in our housing project to attend Catholic school, a school called St. Rita's, which was located across the street from the far end of Patterson Projects. The majority of the students attending St. Rita's were Irish and Italian. As fate would have it, by the time Melvin was in his mid-20s, his boyhood Italian and Irish friends were now living the lives of street hustlers, or, as law enforcement called them, Italian and Irish mobsters. As a result of these friendships, Melvin was introduced to a top-level French Connection drug supplier and never looked back. Melvin did business with every major drug dealer that came through Harlem. The more money Melvin made, the more flamboyant he became, earning himself the nickname Superfly. Other drug dealers, such as Jimmy Terrell, who worked with Melvin, also gained nicknames. Jimmy Terrell would become known as Goldfinger. Harold Munger, another close friend of Melvin's, would become known as Hollywood Harold. These names would remain with Melvin Superfly Combs, Jimmy Goldfinger Terrell, and Harold Hollywood Harold Munger up and until they were unalived in the 1970s and early 1980s. There is an old saying that states, "The apple never falls far from the tree." This is a true statement, especially when you compare Melvin Superfly Combs' illicit gains from being successful and flamboyant to his son Sean P. Diddy Combs' innate and totally legal gains of becoming both successful and flamboyant like his father. Melvin's downfall as a gangster was due to him being young in comparison to the much older black gangsters who ran Harlem and were set in their ways. To them, Melvin was an outsider bringing change to a game they had built and controlled for over 30 years. His flamboyant style, along with his smooth-talking expression and educated words, made Melvin his own man. But he was not the type of man the old-timers were ready to accept as one of them. In reality, Melvin didn't need them because he had what only a few of the older black gangsters, such as Bumpy Johnson, Lamb, Zach, and Robbie had. Melvin had a direct connection to the importation of pure French heroin and did business with all the up-and-coming street hustlers like Leroy Nicky Barnes, Goldfinger, Hollywood Harold, Frank Lee Pee Wee Matthews, and Mikey Barrett, just to name a few. But with all the individuals Melvin surrounded himself with, he never had a bodyguard, which is a cardinal sin for any known street hustler handling the amount of money Melvin was making. The drug game was by far the most vicious, hustle known to man. There were only 2 golden rules you never broke. The first rule was to never be late for an appointment that involved picking up drugs from your supplier or the person he sends. Because if your supplier or the person he sent got busted for whatever reason, you were late and you were a dead man. The second rule was, under no circumstances did you lie and say you got busted as an alibi for not being able to pay your supplier what was owed. If you did that, within several days, a wealthy old-timer would have contacted his man in the local police department and found out you lied, causing panic, doubt, and the fear of you becoming an informant. Melvin Combs became a victim of his wealth and his rapid success that allowed him to bypass the old-timers and their rules. Some people say he was set up to be killed by 2 police detectives who were on the payroll of an elderly black gangster who owned a popular nightclub in Harlem. It is said that Melvin, accompanied by a sexy black female, was pulled over in one of his late model vehicles. Instead of Killling Melvin, I'm sorry, our YouTube guidelines, and the female, the 2 detectives made them get out of the car, and they searched the vehicle for contraband, finding nothing. A search of the trunk also turned up negative. Both Melvin and the female re-entered Melvin's car and drove off. Several blocks down, Melvin was pulled over again, and this time a search rendered by 2 different police officers resulted in him being arrested for possession of a felony amount of drugs. Melvin was booked and charged with possession of a controlled substance with intent to sell. Melvin made bail, and shortly thereafter, word on the street was that he had made a deal with the federal government to become an informant. Without a personal bodyguard, Melvin became a target of greed. With Melvin out of the way, the owner of the popular nightclub in Harlem would enhance his personal wealth. Melvin Superfly Combs was unalived. Several years later, when I had personally become both successful as a street hustler and a close friend of the legendary drug dealer Leroy Nicky Barnes, Nick and I were sitting down talking, and Melvin's name came up in our conversation. Nick told me that the first $1 million he made was due to his friendship and business relationship with Melvin Combs. He said that Melvin wouldn't tell on anyone. The rumor about Melvin being a rat was paid for and put out by the 2 detectives the nightclub owner had hired. Melvin's murder was business, the business of regaining control of the astronomical amounts of money the old gangsters once controlled in Harlem. A few years after Melvin passed, many of the older gangsters met their demise or were sent to prison, and several of the men who had worked with Melvin became known as the Untouchables. Zach Robinson, Frank Lucas, Tito Johnson, Walter Grant, Jimmy Terrell, Frank Matthews, and Leroy Nicky Barnes were plastered across the daily newspapers in New York. All would be arrested and convicted of drug-related crimes, and then sent to both state and federal prisons. Frank Lucas was arrested and convicted of drug-related crimes, and shortly thereafter, he became a federal informant. Tito Johnson was arrested and convicted by the state of New York and served his time. Walter Grant and Jimmy Goldfinger Terrell were both arrested and convicted by the federal government and served their time. All of the above-named Untouchables were convicted with the exception of Leroy Nicky Barnes. He was acquitted of murdering a man in the Bronx who had stolen $65,000 from one of his drug-related workers. Both Zach Robinson and Frank Pee Wee Matthews posted the enormous bails imposed upon them by a federal magistrate. Neither one of them have been seen or heard from in more than 30 years. Word on the streets of New York is the same as that concerning the disappearance of the Teamsters Union boss Jimmy Hoffa. The three of them were unalived, and not a trace of their existence will ever be found. This was the story of Melvin Combs, according to Guy Fisher. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Ciao for now.